Cornell NYC project in the steam plant, and I recognize some people here who may have some input. And so at this point, I'm open to some brief comments before we go into executive session. Okay.
Okay, I have a couple of things for you. You all have this little document that we've put together. But before I get to that one, I wanted to address something that our attorney for RICC had sent us over. And as you all know, Jeff Escobar is not only our attorney for RICC, but he also is on the CB8 Roosevelt Island Committee that is reviewing the zoning, and CB8 has their input in the rezoning as well and the ULURP process. And he points out two things. Number one, that the RIOC land is extremely valuable as part of the Cornell plan. That it may be just a small strip, but it really is a very big factor in the development of their plan. The other thing that he mentions is that although they submitted an original application looking for permission to rezone, including that area, that both CB8, the borough president, and the CPC intend to recommend that zoning not fall to that area so that RIOC actually will retain control over that land and have more teeth to negotiate with because it doesn't become part of the zoning process and the adoption of zoning or rezoning that's part of the current ULURP process. So it's very much distinct and very much up to RIOC to negotiate that space. So I brought you all, they say a picture speaks 1,000 words, and so you have this little nail house that stands alone surrounded by the development area. And you'll see that the caption is, when is a property worth more than it's actually worth, for those of you who don't have a copy of it. And the answer is when it's surrounded by development land. And there are things that we believe that RIOC can do with that land instead of just selling it outright, and that might be one possibility. But the other actually is to retain it and lease it as you've leased all the other assets of RIOC, and to collect land leases each year. Unfortunately, the city of New York, while they gave away that land to Cornell, they didn't take into consideration that the taxes that they derive from that land, and there will be significant taxes because there is corporate co-location, it's not all a school, and there will be other benefits that the city derives, but the city doesn't pay for, and this is unique to Roosevelt Island. Normally, when the city goes through a ULURP process, they're considering the utilization of the revenues that they're generating and how they're providing services for the entity that is the developer. The city sweeps their streets, the city cleans up the litter that they leave behind, the city provides their policing, but on Roosevelt Island, that land is like a little island in the midst of an island. But all of their population will be walking down our streets, they'll need policing, they'll need to be cleaned up after, they'll be using our facilities, they'll be doing all these things that the city would normally provide that will not be provided by the city in this instance. And so RICC believes that this land should be used in order to generate sufficient income to cover the additional services that RIOC is going to have to provide in order for this entity to be established here, and in order for the community not be harmed by the increase in the population, which we guesstimate to be around 7,000. They estimated 5,000 for the folks that are going to be living there and going to school there. They gave us nothing in terms of the corporate co-location. There's going to be a considerable amount of transiency. There's gonna be, additional public safety presence that's gonna be needed. There's gonna be busing that's gonna be needed. There's gonna be additional sports facilities that are gonna be needed. And this is the only linchpin that you have to charge Cornell and get money into the RIOC coffers to pay for the services that you're going to, that this community is gonna be having to provide in order to make this work.
Okay, we're going to be very sure that these factors are recognized in the appraisal that we must do before we make any conveyance to usage of any land.
Can I just make one comment about the appraisal, and it's on here? It's that the appraisal gives you a bottom line. It tells you you can't sell it below this price, but there is no cap on what you can sell it for. You sell it for whatever the market will bear. And what the market will bear has to do with how important it is to Cornell. And it is very important to Cornell that they have that piece of land.
Okay, thank you.
But can I just ask, we keep talking about selling it, it's not ours to sell, we have to lease it, don't we?
It will not be sold.
It couldn't be sold
It'll
if we
be,
wanted
it'll
to.
be, it'll be, it'll,
have to
it would-
lease it.
Whatever
and
you do.
any conveyance is really a transfer
Well,
of use. It'll be-
whatever you
it'll be
do.
the land lease.
What we're saying is whatever you do,
Yeah, no,
it
no,
has
you're
to consider all of the services that are going to be provided by RIOC to Cornell. And keep in mind, Cornell isn't necessarily the only entity that could be paying for that. It could also be the city of New York. Okay, the city of New York is putting them here. The city of New York wants them here. The city of New York can also cough up some money. Normally, they'd be paying for sweeping their streets and cleaning up after them. Cornell can cough up some money. The city of New York can cough up some money. They all want them here.
And the companies that co-locate.
And yes, of course, all of it.
Howard,
All of the above.
add to that. For those of you who don't understand the co-location, those are corporations within the campus. And that could be like a Yahoo or a Google or whomever wants to work there. It will be 1/3 co-location corporations, and they will be paying city taxes. So that's interesting, because Cornell gets land for free, yet 1/3 they will pay city taxes.
And the city
So-
gets the money,
so I
but
think
doesn't
that's-
provide the services.
That's one interesting point to add on. And then also we met RICC. RICC, for those of you who don't know it, stands for Roosevelt Island Community Coalition, and it's a group representing 35 organizations on the island to talk about the Cornell project coming in. With the borough president, when we were talking about some of these issues, that office said, well, do you mind if the money's coming from Cornell or from the city? And we said, no, we don't mind, we don't mind. So there's an open door there for discussion, so I think that empowers RIOC and the directors. Also in perpetuity, so you have your bottom figure of the appraisal, but you also have leasing year after year in perpetuity. So it's, if the helix breaks, maybe that's worth 20 million. If there's road damage, another 5. And then it's year by year for all the services, from security to whatever, year after year in perpetuity. The other item is the hotel.
We only have to lease until 2060.
Until 68.
Oh, 68, I'm so sorry, I meant 2068.
And there are a couple of strategies that are mentioned
And the last thing I'll mention is the hotel. So there will be a hotel there, and you have to assume that maybe more than one person would stay in each room. And that would be, traffic in use, and that's kind of the transient population that we talked about coming in and coming out, beyond the faculty, beyond the students. So just something to think about. It's exciting, it's valuable, and RICC hopes that everyone in the power to negotiate sees that value. That's all.
Okay, thank you. David?
Many years ago, a developer wanted to put a hotel in Coaltion. And we
Yeah, you
did,
get one.
we did some preliminary studies, they're very basic. Every hotel guest, even if they don't arrive in a car, even if they don't bring their own car, it's usually about 4 trips a day, 4 taxi cab trips a day, or 4 limo trips a day for each guest in a hotel. Or balances out, that includes all those other deliveries. So that's even additional to whatever maintenance and supply vehicles will be coming down our street every day.
Wasn't that study about, they get those numbers from a Manhattan? study
No,
was
as a matter of
just a
fact, I derived them for traffic study, that was done in Sausalito, California, which is a small town on the northern side of the bay, which has one road off the main highway into Sausalito. And they started with the awareness that every household is responsible for 10 automobile trips a day.
Right.
And then they started breaking that out for the hotels and businesses in Sausalito. And it came in,
But Sausalito doesn't have the tram and the train and those kinds of things too.
well, that's true.
I'm not,
I
I'm not
understand
suggesting
you're
that
thinking
it's
all
funny,
around
I'm
the,
thinking
around the
we got-
issue, but anything that
I'm
goes
also,
down
because
there.
I think we need a real study.
People arrive from hotels and limousines,
Right.
which means a car down and a car back.
Car back.
And when people leave, it's a car down and a car back.
Right.
You know, if I might just.
Anyway.
Just very quickly, this hotel is going to be part of a larger entity, which is the Executive Conference Center, which means more people coming.
Yeah.
There's a considerable amount of transiency. There are gonna be people that visit the businesses that are down there. There's gonna be the executive center that Judy just mentioned. There's gonna be the hotel. But I wanted to point out something to Margie that you might find very interesting. You know, when we had the community board here, and they were going back and forth about parking, and they were gung-ho about, oh, you don't need parking, everybody's gonna take public transportation, blah, blah, blah. And so I said to them, okay, let me see a show of hands of how many of you drove here tonight. So the vast majority of them came by car. So they all had the availability of coming by public transportation. They were coming from Manhattan. These are not non-New Yorkers. These are people that live in New York, live in Manhattan, and came to this community by car. So how much do you really think you're gonna be able to shrink the use of, public, that you're gonna be able to shrink the amount of parking that's gonna end up, taking our parking spaces? Just another concept I thought you'd be interested in.
Okay.
And I just want to say the DEIS does say there will be approximately 2,000 co-location partners, not companies, but people, employees of the co-locations. That's another 2,000. Above there, 5,200 academic and students. So, wow, thousands
Hotel.
of, they are going to, almost 3/4 of our current population is going to be doubled. So it's a
Okay,
lot.
that's a
It's a
full
whole town.
build out. So
Whole
if
town down.
you could send me copies of your materials and analyses, they'll help us sharpen our pencils as we get more into.
This is the DEIS we're quoting.
Well, yeah, but
Is that what you like?
well, if the DEIS, your response to DEIS, and if we don't have materials otherwise available, if you have points of analysis or position papers, making them available will be useful.
When will you be negotiating with Cornell on this?
I imagine we're going to be negotiating during the rest of this year.
It's not
I
like
mean,
it
the
hasn't started.
the
It
process-
started, and it's a continual kind of thing.
Right, it has begun. There have been discussions, which I'm not going to go into right now. So the process started last year, it's going this year, and it'll go with more intensity later this year.
Can you let Rick know before you make a final determination? Is that possible? I guess it's all.
Can I make a suggestion? Perhaps we have a meeting and sit down and go over all the facts and figures with you.
So,
Well,
Steve,
It would be at a board meeting to approve it.
well, I understand that, but
Yeah,
I
it
think,
would be the same process.
let's just recognize that as representing a group of major stakeholders, Rick, which pardon me, I'm gonna continue to think of as the Roosevelt Island Cornell Coalition, because it's more accurate in just a community, that's confused me. But the Cornell
Cornell folks,
Rick
just say the Cornell.
has been way out in front on a lot of this stuff, but we are working, I don't want us working at cross purposes. Since I've been involved in Roosevelt Island public life for a long time, I know we're probably gonna end up disagreeing on some things.
Can we sit down and have a meeting?
Okay. Now,
One won't do it,
now I just want to mention that
but anyway, way to go. This is
Ellen
new thoughts to
Polby
me,
is one of
thank
the co-chairs of RICC.
Oh, so
but-
it comes down to pillow talk.
No, it doesn't, and that's the thing. I'm trying to maintain
I
a
see
level of
conflict.
separation and objectivity so that I can deal with this without conflict. So I hope I've kept enough blinkers on, so that's, I'll be discovering some things here and be able to be objective in helping shape and guide our negotiations.
If I could suggest, Heather once been married to a woman who's very active in public life, before she passed away. The more you incorporate the thoughts and listen to what Rick is up to as a public body, real estate committee, then the less possibility of conflict there is, because things get aired totally publicly and everybody's aware of what people are thinking about, and that kind of reduces your risk.
Well, Rick has certainly gone forward in a very public manner, going through to all the city agencies as these hearings have gone on, and produced a considerable public record of their views and opinions and analysis.
That's excellent.
So, I'd like to close this session.
Can I ask a question?
One question.
Can you describe to what extent RIOC is independent from the wishes of the city and the state in the negotiations with Cornell?
That's a reporting question, isn't it?
I don't even understand the question.
To what extent?
Make your own mind again.
To what extent is RIOC's negotiating interests independent of the city and the state with regard to Cornell? The city and the state have may have separate interests.
When we reach a value conclusion for ground lease extension, for example, or any sort of lease transaction, we obtain a fairness opinion that analyzes it from our perspective, not from the state's perspective, not from the city's perspective, from the RIOC's perspective, that the transaction is fair to us and represents good value from our perspective in furtherance of our direct mission. So I don't see that we're necessarily following the dictates of our friends in the city or our friends in Albany in this regard. Particularly if at some point we're at relative loggerheads with our friends in the city over some economic conclusions. So I would say that we attempt to be as independent as possible in securing our own direct interests. The board members are fiduciaries of this particular corporation, furthering the benefits and needs of the people of the state of New York, but from the perspective of this particular corporation. So we would try to be as independent as possible in protecting our interests as we perceive them. I hope that's a good answer. Anyone else?
There's a good
No, I
answer.
couldn't have said that.
Make the scrap up.
Porter, are you studying to be a lawyer?